Hey, Chris, Liege Games, let's do this. Which team are you on? Are you team Kickstarter? Are you team Gamefound? Are you somewhere in between? By the way, Gamefound or Kickstarter, neither of you are going to watch this, but I think I'm going to put out shirts that are like something along those lines, right? Team Kickstarter, Team G, Team Gamefound. Anyway, let's take a look at the actual numbers. Let's crunch them. Let's talk about pros. Let's talk about cons and everything in between. Let's do it. Obviously, the big advantage that Kickstarter has nowadays, and I mentioned this in another video previously, Kickstarter has become the Google of search engines, right? When I say I'm going to kickstart something, people know what that is. When I say Gamefound, again, a lot of people in the hobby don't even know what that is yet. It's, entrenched in those of us who are heavily into crowdfunding, heavily into like the Board Game Geek and the, everything, that way. But when it comes to the layperson, someone who is not spending a couple hours a day browsing these websites, browsing games, thinking about games all the time, but just has, any, 20, 50 games, whatever it may be, or less, Gamefound is a complete unknown. And again, I test that sample size wise very small, but it's just not there yet. So what is it doing good? Where does it sort of compare? And what else do we need to know? So let's talk about what we know already. Let's blow it up here. I mean, this is straight from Kickstarter's website. We'll start right here, right? $6 billion raised. 7 million, and this is, again, 21 million total backers is fine, but really where your money is made is repeat people like myself, right? 7 million repeat backers. And they break it down a little bit here, and you can see all the categories of games, which again, totally isn't representative of what the numbers are, and I think it somewhere breaks it down further than this, but 270 games raised over $1 million. How many of those are board games and how many of those are video games? Well, a vast majority are board games. And a vast majority of board games are in these other two columns, which make up a significant portion of the total in any project whatsoever. I mean, you're talking over a quarter of all projects that raised 6 digits are games. And a vast majority of those, again, are going to be board games. You're talking almost a quarter are 20,000 to 99,000. Again, a massive amount. And then it tapers off more comparably there. But that's just the internal statistics that we get to see. The other aspect of this, foot traffic, right? The big thing when we go over to one of these websites, if you're like me, you have this bookmarked. And I sort by popularity because that shows me how things are trending. And I love that view. It also gives me very easily, I can go tabletop games. I can also go newest. I don't do random. Magic is just, what Kickstarter actually wants to show you. It's not random. There's a reason they don't call it random because it's not. But you can easily sort then by new as well. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of overlap between these categories and the search engine is just not really that good, right? You type in sleeping gods, and I get sleeping gods, but then I get that which sleeps, the sleeping gods don't sleep. So that's actually a pretty good one. Let's do something a little bit more generic here. I just received this in the mail. Okay, so there you go. That's actually pretty good. Usually it doesn't give you anything else closer. But now let's see if I delete a couple of these. Now, if you do hidden lead, well, none of these are even finding the title of hidden leaders, right? So the search engine is meh at best. We'll get it probably here. Oh, no, look at that. We don't even get hidden lead. We don't even get it in the 7 results there. That's definitely one that is subpar at best. Let's head back over here to a page. Let's pick a page of something I'm interested in. Let's give Explorers of the Woodlands 44 hours to go. Let's give them a little bit of a love here. So, things I don't like in general. So, what does Kickstarter have going for it right now? Again, the saved, very clear. You get a notification at 48. You also get several more notifications, which have sort of popped up over the last year or two. You can share it, whatever. That's fine. The page itself, definitely a detriment to compared to Gamefound, that you really can't organize this nearly as well over here. And the pledge levels are okay. It's this little side-scrolling thing. But again, it's a little bit cumbersome. It's not as smooth. FAQ is there, updates are there, comments are there, and comment section has literally, I don't think even ever been updated, except for maybe the fact that you can actually highlight and reply now, but that's about it. You can't tell who's replying. There's no chain. You can't tell, like on Reddit, like you're responding to this person, I'm responding to this person, and it's sort of tiered over, so you can kind of, tab over, tab over, tab over. You can see which one is which. It's basically just this one, right? And then everything else is straight below. So it's poor in terms of interactions. It's poor for management. It's poor for just being able to ask things. You have to back if you want to post comments, which is a blessing and a curse. Now let's talk about the other elephant in the room, just the foot traffic, barring the pledges. Let's talk about returning backers. Let's talk about who goes there. How does this compare? Because that's the other thing that I think we have seen with several projects. Now, this is not going to be representative, obviously, of a large sample size, but I'm going to show you one that really comes to mind when I think of the foot traffic from Kickstarter and Gamefound. Now, again, this is totally anecdotal, so take it for what it is. Full disclaimer. Kingdom Rush, the first time around, the Rift in Time, this was a very well thought of game. This was based off a very popular IP. Lucky Duck Games put out a very good product. A very good product and a very good game. Those two things are not always together. And this is arguably one of those that was. 11,900 backers, almost $1.1 million raised. So that's not insignificant. Again, all the page, all the stuff, tons and tons of stuff there. No problem. Second one, Kingdom Rush, Elemental Uprising. Arguably, 2.0 version of the game. Arguably going to be a better version of the game, even though it's still in the process of being delivered. 7,700 people, just under, and only 865,000. Now, this is where we're splitting hairs. Is it because people have the first one and don't feel obligated to get the second one? Or is this one a better version and you're going either or? I would be loving to see how many of these people were returning backers from the first one. And that's the sort of thing that you can't compare. But it's definitely a downtick. And for a game that is relatively well thought of, a downtick is very interesting. Here's another case study. Another case study. And this one's interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of this one because Gamefound has attracted also some big fish. And sometimes it appears with the big fish they do really well, and sometimes they just haven't. This game was relatively acclaimed going into it. It got $1.1 million, 12,000 people. Now we're running towards the end of Distant Skies, and we're going to probably end up almost double with almost the same amount of backers. But this is another interesting test. Is it double because there's that many more? No, it's not actually. It's maybe double because they're offering the only way to get Sleeping Gods easily the second time around. So what would be really telling on this, as a side note, is could you split how many people are getting the original, and then what's the real funding of just Distant Skies? Anyway, that's a side note though. But let's stay here for a second and let's talk about some of the Gamefound features of a page that I do really, really like. The number one thing, and this is the number one thing I'm going to put out right here at the beginning, is this following thing. You can't see me following it because I'm backing it, but the ability to follow a campaign prior to launch. Let's go over here to an actual draft page where you can see it. Follow, unfollow, which is significantly better on Gamefound, both from a creator standpoint as well as a customer standpoint, because that's what we are. We're not backers, we're customers. Don't ever forget that. It's better because it allows communication even pre-campaign. Because what's been missing with Kickstarter this whole time is a way to interact with your community to help build up that community apart from having a whole separate website, page, social media presence. Correct? It's been difficult for a lot of small people to get noticed in that sense, but now it's an all-in-one, which I think is a tremendous asset, much less so for some of the big ones, which are known and searched for and, have an established presence. But the ability to put out, a full comment section, again, here with the graded sort of interaction so you can see who's responding to who, a little bit better in that sense, as well sorting, and then being able to interact even before the campaign. But the most important thing right here is updates that you can send out pre-campaign as well, depending on how you feel. I know obviously some people get inundated with updates and do not like that at all, but this is a very easy way to communicate with all of these people, because, you know, Awakened Realms, maybe they have a different website, maybe they have a different social media that isn't going to be followed nearly as much, because people only maybe want to know about this game. These 27,000 people only want to know about Castles of Burgundy. They don't want to know about the updates on ISS Vanguard or Tainted Grail or Aetherfields and how late that is. But they just want to know about this. And then you have a dedicated thing that you can subtly send just to those people who are just interested in this. And then people feel like it's a better situation. Now let's go back to Sleeping Gods, because this has the full page here for a second. I like the project story along the side of this, being able to navigate it, because frankly speaking, these crowdfunding pages are getting too big. They have too much information and not enough of the information that they usually need. Do you know how to play Sleeping Gods based off of this page? No, you really don't. You really don't get a sense of the mechanics that are going on in this page. You don't. And that's one of my biggest criticisms of crowdfunding pages in general. Kickstarter or Gamefound, that goes to a creator side of things. But you can see already pledges right here, add-ons, details, which again, crowdfunding pages in general, let's put the details after all the bling and the money. It's the way things go. I don't like it. And then they run through everything that you need to know. You can click right down to the shipping. You can go to what the cancellation policy is. They usually have a recommended pledge also up here, which tends to often be one of the highest pledge levels that's usually on the page. But the breakdown of being able to scroll through this instead of doing this, endlessly is kind of nice. And this is actually a much smaller crowdfunding page than a lot of other games. And it's just nice. You can just add it right here. The add-ons aren't separate. After you click pledge, you can see the price levels of everything. Everything is on the page in that aspect. And it's much more graphically as well as consumer friendly in those manners. So let's talk about visitors though. Let's go back to that. This is an independent website, traffic and engagement. This is SimilarWeb. So now this one, I don't know if Gamefound is on here, but we're going to start with Kickstarter versus Indiegogo, because up until Gamefound, Indiegogo was really the second option. It was not a great second option by any means. It was sort of WWE versus Impact. Hear me out, but I'm right. 20 million unique visits, almost 21 million unique visits from Kickstarter, 7 million to Indiegogo. Again, that's down 16% for them and down 6% for them. Page per visits, okay, great. Bounce rate, okay, great. But really, that goes back to that foot traffic. 21 million people. If you have more people searching, Googling, browsing, you're inevitably going to have a larger audience than you would otherwise, right? Occasionally, I will randomly go to the food or the entertainment sections of Kickstarter. I haven't backed much on there, but that's how people get into things. And to give that a little bit of perspective here, Board Game Geek gets 13.1 in terms of million visitors a month. So if you think there's a lot of traffic on Board Game Geek, well, you're looking at, over 150% more traffic on Kickstarter. So you are catching a lot more of those people that aren't knee deep in the hobby, like I mentioned. We're going to go to Gamefound here. So here we're going to look at Gamefound here for a second. You can find it on this website. Again, the 19th ranked, which is actually really comparatively good, but there also speaks to the fact that we don't really have many alternatives in the board game scene in the first place. 12,000th overall, and 2.8 million visitors. So you're looking at not tenfold, but ninefold decrease in foot traffic. That is significant. It is. Now, obviously, these are all unique, but we already saw the statistics at the beginning of how much of it is going into the games. And if I told you a quarter of it, based on those numbers, a quarter of Kickstarter was board games, would you agree with that? As just as an estimate for this video's sake? Which means you're talking about 5.2 million visits in that sense, if you make it equal, a quarter there and a quarter of the visits, which again is almost double the foot traffic. They're having some RPG stuff as well. The most interesting thing here is 10 pages per visit though. That is significantly over what Kickstarter does. Let's go back to this aspect of Gamefound, which I have not talked about yet. Featured products, which is the same thing as Kickstarter. We love this project, right? Because those ones always pop up at the top. They pop up the top here. And just like Kickstarter, it tends to be the ones grossing the most money. It does. And, it is what it is. And the active projects down here, this is really where Kickstarter does a better job of displaying, sorting, allowing you to see a little bit better in terms of this. Now, they've started having a little bit more on this page. The upcoming projects, which you can click see all on, which I really appreciate. It has that some of them, the ones that are having dates announced already, you can see how many days until launch, which I really like. And then they finally just added this down here recently, browsing projects, which allows companies, campaigns to classify themselves as Kickstarter allows you to classify yourself. Only this is obviously board game specific, which is interesting because some of these, the big 6 right here, but you can see all of the terms and the things down here, which is very interesting. That's going to be very interesting to see how that develops and whether or not it's worth having all of these, because obviously there's overlap, but it allows people to maybe sort a little bit more in the future when there is a more appropriate amount of audience and projects to sort through. Now, let's get down to the nitty gritty though, because, the other thing that we have seen, the whole invention of Gamefound was based on their pledge manager that sort of led into the actual website. And so here, they talk about all of this, everything there. And, this one I haven't touched on, platform growth. The fact that Gamefound has been able to do what they have done, and I'm not poo-pooing it in any means, or way, or shape, or form, but just stating out those numbers, the fact that they have done that in such a short amount of time also makes me go, why the heck has Kickstarter not addressed any of those issues? Why have they not done anything? You're losing potentially a significant portion of your golden goose, and you're just sort of twiddling your thumbs, going and resting on your laurels. That only goes for so long. See Jeeves, Yahoo Chat, Yahoo search engine, anything like that. Because if you don't stay up with it, you're going to get replaced. Now, here's the pricing side of things. And I was a little bit surprised by this. Okay, 5% in crowdfunding. Great. Okay, that's fine. 5% of your total. 0% in the pledge manager, though. And then the transaction is 3% plus a fixed every transaction. Okay. One of the things that had been initially boosted was that it was going to cost less. Now we go over to Kickstarter, and the fees for the US is, again, 5% plus 3% plus 20% per pledge, not transaction. Now, that's a distinct slight difference, and they have this thing for under $10 pledges. Okay, that's great. But the thing that's really interesting there is per transaction. So if you open a pledge manager several times, and if you're like me, and you maybe piecemeal it over 1 or 2 months, they're getting a slight chunk every single time, which I guess is probably about the same overall, I think. Which could add up over time, but it's overall not very much. I think the big thing that's probably appealing, even though these numbers on surface look very much the same, is that 0% in the pledge manager. They'll let you do the pledge manager for free. Because that's really where the difference is. When you go over to BackerKit here, for example, like Simon just switched over to BackerKit instead of using their own. The more you raise, the lower your rate. Transaction fee is another 3.5% here. So to help manage it, you're even having to spend more money. So again, something to consider from that aspect. That's why I think you're starting to see more projects poured over. It's the back end of things that they're having more savings in. And it's going to be interesting to see if we see more of that as well now that it's quote unquote opened up to almost everybody. One last thing, and I've had this personally, so I'm really going to compare apples to apples here. If I go to a pledge, for example, am I pledging anything on Kickstarter right now? I'm not. If you go to something on Kickstarter, though, let's go back to Explorers of the Woodlands. If I go, for example, to back this project, again, very clear. Let's pledge without a reward here. Let's do 1. Click it. Submit. Voila. I am now pledging for Explorers of the Woodlands. The one thing I'm doing here that I like, that Kickstarter does slightly better, manage your pledge right here. I can cancel my pledge just by clicking cancel, and I'm done. On Gamefound, if I need to cancel a pledge for something I'm doing, right? Let's take a look here. I go down here, I go to edit pledge, manage pledge, and then there's sort of this cart that you're left with. And it's distinctly different, and it's not as intuitive. I've actually taken stuff out of my cart in the past, and then thought I canceled it, and did not cancel. And so you have to be much more cautious in this, just as a small, again, it's an incidental thing, but I have had a pledge, and tell me if you guys had that happen to you, and it's just a small thing, but it's just not as intuitive on canceling. There's no cancel button. Now, I can't even do this. I would have to exit out there and then probably submit it again. So again, it's a minor thing, but I hope they would address, I would hope that that could be easily fixed as well. So there you go. So where are you at? I mean, Team Kickstarter, Team Gamefound. I know a lot of people on my side of things are definitely heavier Gamefound. And I know there's been a lot of issue from Kickstarter with the whole blockchain thing and, you know, that aspect. And I can't talk to that because they sort of got some feedback afterwards, and I think they put it on hold. But again, I'm not going to go into the details of that. That's outside of my personal depth of scope. But it's going to be interesting to see with this upstart Gamefound, this little upstart, you know what I mean, to see where this goes and evolves over the next year or two. You know, they have a very hot trajectory right now, and can they keep that momentum up? And I don't know. But it's going to be fun to watch because competition is good in that aspect. The lack of competition sometimes is not good for hobbies or in general. Creates monopolies. Innovation is the product of competition. I mean, I've spent my fair share on both, though. So it is what it is. It's going to be interesting to watch a year or two from now and look back and compare where things were at. So there you go. Stay classy. Have a great day. Interesting discussion. Interesting insights there, just with an actual number by number comparison. So hopefully you liked it. Thumb it, subscribe, Patreon it. Have a great day. See you around.